Hey guys, so I am currently studying one of my endocrinology lectures, and I thought this would be a great time to show you how I study and how I feel like that helps me memorize the loads of information that we have to learn every day. I feel like I mention Anki pretty much in every video, and people are probably like, what is Anki, or how do you use it? Or I tried to use Anki and it didn't work for me, so I'm just going to show you how I use it. As you all know, Anki is a flashcard system. Basically, you're making your own flashcards, or there's so many like pre-made flashcards out there that I also use. Even though I do have pre-made flashcards, there's still some things that we learn in lecture that you won't find in pre-made decks. So I do still have to make my own flashcards for a lot of things. One important thing when making flashcards, you don't want to make flashcards out of every little thing from the lecture. Like, that's not the point. Because at the end of the day, like for my school, they're only going to take out 2 to 3 things and make a test question out of it per lecture. So you want to focus on what's really important. Don't try to memorize a bunch of lists unless that professor in that lecture specifically says you need to memorize this list. I'll just show you how I do mine, and hopefully this helps somebody out there. Okay, so right now I have my desk space set up. I have my iPad. Now, if you don't have an iPad, you can still take notes. You can take handwritten notes, whatever, however you like to do it. I personally think that an iPad for medical school has been the greatest upgrade of my life because I no longer have to waste paper. Yeah, I use my iPad as I'm watching the lecture. So the professor is talking and I'll be on the same slide that he's on, and I will be taking my notes and writing down like really important things that he's saying, so that whenever I do have to go back and review my lectures, especially for finals, I don't have to watch the lecture again, really. I just kind of go through my notes, and then obviously my flashcards are like my major source of review, so I'll do that too. All right, so let me start watching the lecture and I'll show you how I take notes on my PowerPoint. So another thing I wanted to mention, I watch my lectures at 2 times speed. As a slow, I'll go 1.5 times, just because, you know, I can't sit here and watch a slow lecture at 1 time speed. So I watch it at 2 times speed, and as I'm listening, I'm just kind of taking major notes, and then I will go straight to my Anki card. So I'm about to open that up and show you. So this is the front page of Anki. It's pretty bland, yes, but don't worry about that. I'm just gonna show you or give you like a really quick tutorial. This is not super in-depth. This video is just going to be me assuming that you've played around with Anki before, but you just want to know how I utilize it personally to study. So I'm not gonna make this super long. All right, so there are 3 sections here. You have your deck, due cards, and new cards. The major decks, I have a lot of decks here, but I don't use all of them, or some of them I have already used in past blocks, but I do not use them anymore. The major decks that I use consistently are my pre-made decks, the Zonky Step deck, and the Dope 1 Medical Science deck. These are pre-made Step 1 decks made by past medical students who were studying for Step 1 and just took all those Step 1 resources like first aid, pathoma, boards and beyond facts, and put it all in one deck. You can download these at reddit.com, and I think they've been really helpful. Not only just now that I'm studying for STEP, they've been helpful obviously, but using them alongside with the lectures that you have to watch in class and just testing yourself, I think has also been really helpful. And then obviously there's going to be facts that you learn in school that you don't need to know for Step 1, but you still need to know it for your exam. So I also have a separate deck here that I use, and I make my own flashcards. It's called the Block 4 deck. Okay, so let me quickly go through the options. So if you click on options, I'm not gonna lie, most of these numbers are the default numbers that Anki, like, you don't really need to mess around too much with these settings. So I wouldn't if I were you, but so far, new cards per day, I set my new cards to 30 just because I feel really overwhelmed. And it also forces me to make sure that I'm not making too many new cards. Like, you really should have no more than 10 to 12 new cards per lecture. So you shouldn't be making too many cards. You should just be focusing on the major points from the lecture. And then I also make sure that the new cards are going to be shown to me in a random order rather than the order added. Just make sure you do not cap your reviews. You should not be capping your reviews because that kind of just defeats the purpose of Anki if you're not doing like the amount of reviews that you're supposed to do. Okay, everything else, not that important. Okay, so let me just show you how I utilize Anki by either unsuspending a card or just making my own card. So let's go back to my lecture. Okay, so this is the lecture that I'm going to use as an example today. So I'm just on Panopto watching this lecture, and here I get to fat necrosis, which is a type of inflammation of the breast. So this is obviously important. Like, he has a whole slide about this. I'm going to show you how to make a basic card. So step one, go back to Anki. I'm going to go to my block 4 deck because this is the deck that I use to make my own cards. So I'm going to click add, and we're going to go and choose basic here. I clicked on type and make sure that it says block 4 deck here in the name of the deck. Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make a card that will help me remember what fat necrosis is. So I'm just gonna say firm nodule / inflammation of the breast that typically presents after trauma. So my answer would be fat necrosis. So that would appear on the back of the card. So I'm going to show you what it looks like once I add this. So you're going to press add. And then we'll look at the card. Going back to block 4 deck, as you can see, we have one new card, and that's the card that I just made. So I'm going to click on the deck and study now. It says firm nodule / inflammation of the breast that typically presents after trauma. So you're going to go down and click on show answer once you try to figure out what it is. So fat necrosis is the answer. And if you get it right, it'll give you 3 options. If you thought this was a really easy card, then you probably won't want to see it for another 4 days. If you thought it was okay, like you struggled a little trying to remember, then you might want to see it again in 15 minutes so that you can really get that in your brain. But if you thought it was so hard and you couldn't even guess that it was fat necrosis, then you definitely want to see it again in 3 minutes. And that's just how Anki works. Like, it will make it so that you see the card enough times, depending on how easy or hard it was for you, and it'll make sure that you never forget what the answer was to that card again. Instead of making my own cards, which does take a little bit more time, the faster way I could have done this was going to my Anki step deck and browsing. So like I said, this is a pre-made deck. So I'm going to type in fat necrosis. Typed it in, and this is everything between the Dope One medical deck and the Anki deck that has the word fat necrosis in it. There are a lot of cards that ask the same question, so you really just need to choose one and use that card to study. I'm kind of just searching. All right, so this is a good card. This is very similar to the one that I made on my own. It says fat necrosis of breast tissue is usually related to trauma, but a history of such is not always reported. So what I would do, the reason that these cards are yellow is because I have them suspended right now. So what you want to do, if you want to see the card show up in your review from now on, you would right click and unsuspend it so that it shows white instead of yellow. So once you do that, I'm going to exit out here at the top, and it's going to show up in Anki step deck. So I'm going to click on this, and this is how the card appears whenever you're ready to review. They're using the cloze deletion feature here, and I will also show you how to use that. But it says fat necrosis of breast tissue is usually related to blank, but a history of such is not always reported. So the answer is trauma. And as you can see, trauma and fat necrosis, big association that you need to know. So knowing that word in particular will help you answer a lot of test questions. So the answer to this is trauma. And in order to check to make sure that I was right, I'm going to click on show answer, and it'll pop up in blue. I really love this deck. I think that it makes sure that you know the important parts and the important buzzwords associated with different diseases. So I would click on easy, and that means I won't see this card again for 4 days, and that would be that for that deck. Okay, so I taught you how to unsuspend. I taught you how to make a basic card, and now I'm going to teach you how to do a cloze deletion. One thing that I can do is I can make another card and just add it to my personal deck. So I'm going to make another card about fat necrosis of the breast. Usually, fat necrosis of the breast is associated with trauma. So I'm going to type this sentence, and I'm going to change the card type and scroll down until I see cloze deletion, choose that, and I'm going to highlight trauma because that is like the important word, that buzzword that I want to memorize. And then I'm going to click cloze deletion here, and it should say C1 blah blah and the word trauma. That means this is the word that's going to be hidden whenever you actually review the card on your own. So I'm going to add the card now, and I'm going to exit out, and I'm going to study now. And this is what the card looks like when you're ready to review. It just closes out the buzzword that you need to know. So usually fat necrosis of the breast is associated with trauma, show answer, easy, okay, won't see it again in 4 days. The last thing I want to show you is how to use image occlusion. Image occlusion is really good. Sometimes I get lazy and I don't want to type out like a whole sentence or two, so I just use image occlusion. So let me show you how that works. This is gynecomastia. I think that it might be a little too much for me to have to, make my own card and type out a sentence and blah, 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 blah. So usually what I'll do is I'll screenshot the this part of the video and I'll crop it. So just cropped it, okay, and I'll copy it. And I will go back to my deck and add this image occlusion by clicking on this. It looks like a picture frame here, but it says add image occlusion. I'll click on it. And then what I'll do, the box is already highlighted, and I'll just go over the word gynecomastia. And I will quiz myself. It says hide one, guess one, or hide all, guess one. I only have one block, so it really doesn't matter which one I choose. Hide all, guess one. So I'll go back, study now, and this is what shows up on my card. So basically how I would study this is I would just look at the bullet points here. Okay, subareolar enlargement, unilateral, bilateral, occurs at puberty, indicator of hyperestrogenism, and it's in the male breast. So this should all tell me that this condition is called gynecomastia. So that's just another way to quiz yourself. I think it's also good to use image occlusion during anatomy, especially if you want to quiz yourself on different parts of the body. But this is how I use it. There, gynecomastia, that was easy. Won't see it again for 4 days. All right, so that was a quick rundown of how I use Anki. I think that it's also really important to add pictures to your cards, especially if you're not in a rush. I think this whole idea of like screenshotting different slides on the lectures and copying and pasting it into your card really helps you. Not only are you learning the card from Anki, but you're also associating it with a picture to where even if that card is difficult for you, it becomes easier over time because you're remembering the picture that's associated with it. So that's just my little bit of advice. Okay, so that was my Anki tutorial. If you have any questions about any specific features, then please let me know. But this was just a quick rundown. This is for people who I assume have played around with it and just have some questions about how I personally use it. Thank you for watching.